Imagine waking up at 67, looking at your bank account, and realizing the number staring back decides everything: where you live, what you eat, whether you fly to see your grandkids in Vancouver or watch them grow up through a phone screen. That number is the difference between a retirement that feels free and one that feels like a second job nobody signed up for. So today we're going to break down exactly what retirement looks like in Canada with 1 million, 3 million, and $5 million in the bank. Real numbers, real lifestyles, based on what things actually cost in 2026. Before we get into the three scenarios, let's set the foundation, because most Canadians have no idea what they're actually working with. As of January 2026, the maximum monthly CPP payment for someone retiring at 65 is $1,507.65. But here's the catch: the average new retiree only gets about $925 a month because most people don't contribute the maximum for 39 years. Then there's OAS, which adds another $743 a month if you're between 65 and 74, and $817 once you hit 75. So a typical Canadian couple with average CPP and full OAS walks into retirement with roughly $40,000 a year from the government before they touch a single dollar of their own savings. That's the floor. Everything else depends on what you've built. And here's something worth remembering: CPP and OAS are both indexed to inflation, which means those payments adjust upward over time as the cost of living rises. That's a real advantage because almost no private pension in Canada gives you that kind of built-in protection anymore. Now let's talk about the rule almost every Canadian retiree uses to figure out how much they can spend. It's called the 4% rule. The idea is simple. If you withdraw 4% of your portfolio in your first year of retirement and then adjust that amount for inflation each year after, your money should last about 30 years. Some advisors in Canada are now using 3.5% because we're living longer and markets have been unpredictable. But for today, 4% works as a realistic benchmark. Let's start with $1 million. This is the number most Canadians dream about. But here's what 1 million actually buys you in 2026. Using the 4% rule, you're pulling out $40,000 a year from your portfolio. Add average CPP and full OAS for one person, and you're looking at roughly $60,000 in gross income before tax. After tax in a province like Ontario, you'll keep around $50,000. That's about $4,200 a month to cover everything: housing, food, transportation, insurance, healthcare gaps, travel, gifts for the grandkids, and any surprise expense life throws at you. If your home is paid off, this works. You can live a decent middle-class retirement, eat well, drive a reliable car, take one trip a year, and sleep okay at night. But if you're still carrying a mortgage, or you're renting in Toronto, Vancouver, or even Halifax now, $1 million starts to feel tight fast. The average Canadian retiree aged 65 and up spends about $6,540 a month, according to recent Stats Can data. That's $78,500 a year. So unless you're well below average, or you have a paid-off home and a frugal lifestyle, $1 million in Canada today is closer to the baseline than the dream. And there's one more thing to factor in at this level. Inflation eats away at fixed withdrawals faster than people expect. A grocery bill that runs you $800 a month today could easily climb past $1,200 within 15 years, even at moderate inflation. That's why a $1 million portfolio that looks comfortable on day one can start to feel restrictive by your mid-70s, especially if healthcare costs accelerate at the same time. Now let's jump to $3 million. This is where the conversation changes completely. Pulling 4% gives you $120,000 a year from your portfolio. Add CPP and OAS for a couple, and your household is looking at around $160,000 before tax. After tax, depending on how you split income and where you live, you're keeping somewhere between $120,000 and $130,000 a year. That's about $10,000 a month to spend, and now retirement starts to feel like the version people actually want. At this level, your home is almost certainly paid off. You can own a vehicle without thinking about it, and you can travel 2 or 3 times a year without checking the bank balance first. Want to spend a month in Portugal in the winter? Done. Want to help your kids with a down payment? You can. Want to drive a newer SUV, eat out twice a week, and keep a cottage in Muskoka or somewhere in the eastern townships? It's tight, but doable. And here's the part nobody talks about. With $3 million, you can actually afford long term care if your health changes. The average private retirement home in Canada now costs between $4,000 and $7,000 a month. This is also the level where you can start using your TFSA strategically. Every dollar growing inside your TFSA comes out tax free, which means you can manage your tax bracket in retirement and avoid the OAS clawback, which kicks in at $95,323 of individual income in 2026. With $3 million split between RRSPs, TFSAs, and non registered accounts, you have options. And options are what real wealth actually feels like. Pension splitting between spouses opens up another layer of savings, because moving up to 50% of eligible pension income to a lower earning partner can shave thousands off your annual tax bill. Now let's talk about $5 million. Pulling 4% gives you $200,000 a year from your portfolio alone, before any government benefits. After tax, a couple with this setup is keeping somewhere around $160,000 to $180,000 a year. That's $13,000 to $15,000 a month, and the lifestyle shifts again. At $5 million, you're not asking what things cost anymore. You're asking what you actually want: a waterfront condo in Victoria, a second property in Florida or Arizona for the winter, business class flights instead of economy, private healthcare add ons, a vehicle every 5 or 6 years instead of every 15. And maybe the biggest difference: you can give money away while you're alive. You can fund your grandkids' RESPs, pay for a family trip every year, and still leave a real inheritance behind. Most retirees with 1 million can't touch their principal. Retirees with 5 million can spend freely and still leave more behind than they started with, because their portfolio is growing faster than they can withdraw from it. At this level, estate planning becomes the real conversation. Setting up trusts, planning for the deemed disposition tax that hits your estate at death, donating shares of appreciated stock to charity instead of cash. These moves can save your family hundreds of thousands of dollars when the time comes. A good Canadian tax accountant becomes one of the most valuable people in your life, because the difference between a planned estate and an unplanned one can run into 7 figures. But here's the part to really hear. The gap between 1 million and 5 million isn't just about lifestyle, it's about pressure. With 1 million, every market dip feels personal. Every grocery bill gets noticed. With 5 million, the market can drop 30% and you barely flinch, because your withdrawal rate is so low your money keeps growing anyway. That's the real prize, the peace of mind. So what does this mean for you? It means the number you're aiming for matters less than the habits you build to get there. Maxing out your TFSA every year compounds into hundreds of thousands of dollars over a working career. Adding to your RRSP and getting the tax refund back working for you can double the impact. And if you start in your 30s instead of your 50s, you don't need to save aggressively. You just need to save consistently. A Canadian who puts away $500 a month from age 30 to 65, earning a 7% average return, ends up with just under $900,000. Bump that to $800 a month and you cross 1.4 million. Same person starting at 45 has to save almost 3 times as much per month to land in the same place. Time does the heavy lifting, and waiting is the most expensive decision in personal finance. But here's the truth. You probably don't need $5 million to retire well in Canada, but you almost certainly need more than 1 million if you want any real flexibility. The sweet spot for most Canadian couples sits somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5 million combined, with a paid-off home and a clear withdrawal plan. That's the version of retirement where you can actually breathe. If this breakdown helped you see your future a little clearer, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.